one of Clive Barker's most epic sagas of all time, Books of Blood. Yes, I understand it's about to be the witching hour and I have to do a Halloween special. People are waiting on it, but I don't know what to do. I did Stephen King's corniest movies. I did some Clive Barker. And I'm just running out of Clive Barker movies. He doesn't have that many. I'll call you back, Jacqueline. Oh man, this Halloween stinks. Wait a second or two. Oh my God. This is just volume 1. It has masterpieces such as The Book of Blood, Pig Blood Blues, even Sex, Death, and Starshine. When authors have their movies made into adaptations from Stephen King, Dean Koontz, Joe Hill, Clive Barker, a lot of times they miss the mark. We've done a lot of duds on this channel, a lot of hilariously bad horror, and some pretty good ones. But I'm gonna say, no spoilers, I think Books of Blood might be the best one yet. And no, we're not talking about the 2009 Books of Blood, we're talking about the 2020 Huluween Books of Blood. That is very special. It's a pretty creepy movie, so if you want to check that out, come hang out. What up, y'all? Welcome back to Phantom of the Indie Review. I am your host, Pumpkin Dill, and yes, it is the beautiful Halloween episode, something we've been building up to all month long. Sadly, my goal was 4,000 subscribers by Halloween. I don't think we're gonna make it, but the effort you guys put in is tremendous, and honestly, I prefer quality over quantity anyhow, but if you're new or been watching for a while, please subscribe. If y'all thought October was crazy, November's gonna be even more doper. So if you want to hang out with me and see the ghost of a little boy rocking in a chair, subscribe and come chill. Anthologies are a very popular framework in horror, not just in film, but in literature too, because so many writers have these quick ideas that they create short story collections. But in movies, we see an abundance of standalone anthology films, such as Creepshow, The House That Dripped Blood, Trilogy of Terror, Body Bags. But Books of Blood I find to be very special. Not only because Clive Barker dedicated the majority of his career to this 6-volume installment, but because of how different the content really is. Even a commenter just commented on my previous Pinhead video that Clive Barker has such a distinct writing style and he's not afraid to break the mold. He tells tales that are absolutely terrifying. Stephen King, I hate to keep comparing to Stephen King. Yes, Stephen King does have some great ones, but a lot of them are cookie cutter and run of the mill. Books of Blood is a series of 6 horror fiction anthologies collecting original stories written by Clive Barker. Clive Barker's tagline for Books of Blood was, "Everybody is a book of blood. Wherever we're opened, we are read." The opening story, The Books of Blood, opens the premises of the entire anthology by revealing that a fake psychic is attacked one night by genuine ghosts and spirits who decide to make him a true messenger by writing stories into his flesh. And the stories range in genre as well. Some are traditional horror, some are described by Barker as dark fantasy, some are comical, and The Last Illusion is notable for being a mixture of horror and noir while also introducing the occult detective Harry D'Amour. I was going to do the Last Illusion movie for BARKERWEEN, but I wanted to do this one more so if you guys want to see me do Lord of Illusions, let me know. I've talked about it numerous times, all the stories that came from the Books of Blood. I also had an idea where I kind of wanted to maybe read some on it for a YouTube video, so if you're interested in that, hearing my silky smooth voice, comment down below and maybe we can do an episode. I want to read The Yattering and the Jack. I feel like that sounds really cool. But y'all saw me yapping too much. Let's talk about the movie itself. It pretty much sets up 3 stories, the first one interweaving from beginning to end. Just like in Books of Blood anthologies, the first story and the last story intermingle, and then this one has 2 different stories on the inside. The first story is called Jenna. Jenna Branson is a college student suffering from mental illness that makes the smallest of noises overwhelming for her. Unhappy at home, she decides to run away after becoming non-compliant with her medication. She begins to suspect that someone is following her and takes refuge at a bed and breakfast. And to start off as the main story for this movie is very interesting. I mean, the intro starts off with this dude named Bennett who is looking for the Books of Blood, but it's set up to be a small intro, so when we get into the story about Jenna, she is definitely unwell. She is very overwhelmed all the time, and her parents don't seem to really care. They have that typical, like, oh, honey, everything's okay, like when they're eating dinner and she's getting all bothered by it. They're like, here we go again, you're just always on one. And they're not really understanding the difficulties and complications of mental illness, which I feel like so many family members do. And she just kind of has had enough, so she decides to steal some money from their safe and just take a bus and flee. And she ends up in this bed and breakfast with this nice couple. The couple is Ellie and Sam Austin. Jenna begins to bond with them and starts to open up to them and being able to reveal how she feels, and they seem to be very nurturing, almost like the parents she never had. And Jenna begins to bond with a fellow guest mate named Gavin, almost kindling some sort of love interest with him. She seems to find another person in her life that makes her feel comfortable, which is very good because for so long she felt so misunderstood. And she starts to hallucinate a lot. She has delusions. She feels like bugs are crawling all over her, and Ellie just seems to be there for her. A little sweet, humble old lady that is pretty much like, hey, we're here for you. You're gonna be okay. When everything seems picturesque and perfect, she is actually tormented by the reveal that her bed and breakfast hosts are harboring people inside their walls and the floor, and they are essentially paralyzing them. And what they think they're doing is good. They're saying they're taking their eyes and their ears away and keeping them alive so they can be rid of all the guilt, trauma, and stress in their life, and they think that they're essentially playing heroes to these people. So what they do is go to kidnap Jenna herself and make her one of their victims. Ellie used to be a medical practitioner, so she has the skills to sedate and remove extremities and body parts from their victims. And her husband, he seems to be able to craft their coffins, their homes, and do all the woodwork. The movie doesn't really get into much detail, very much so why they do this, but it's very eerie because, like I said, you feel very confident and comfortable with this family. You don't get really any red flags. You get red flags around the story and you know something scary is happening, but you don't quite depict them as being the monsters until they are. And it's just so creepy too because there's just random compartments in the house that just have coffins filled with people. It's like the people under the stairs, but the House of a Thousand Corpses is just people inside the house. And earlier when I said Jenna feels like she's being stalked by someone, she actually was, and the stalker actually goes to the house to try to be like, hey, I've been following this girl around. Playing off not too creepy, but just being like, I'm just checking on her, and he gets got and killed brutally by the bed and breakfast hosts because they're not trying to let Jenna go. And the story kind of has this crazy plot twist ending where Ellie and Sam go to dispose of the body of the stalker that's stalking Jenna, but as they're killing him and doing all this crazy stuff, she kind of gets unsedated and escapes and hides in the car. But little do they know she is in the back of the car, and little does she know that they're driving this body off to a remote cliff area to drive the car off the cliff to make it look like suicide, so she plummets to her death. And then the second story, Miles, is personally my favorite one, even though the first one is a great intro and it's very eerie and unsettling, and the fact of someone being sewn up and stuck into a coffin. It's very creepy, but she kind of spares that and gets killed. Miles is about a lady named Mary Floreski who was grieving the loss of her very young son, Miles, who passed away from cancer. One day, Mary is approached by a psychic named Simon McNeil who claims that he is communicating with her dead son, Miles. While Mary is pretty skeptical, Mary truly wishes to speak to her son and decides that this could be a beneficial experiment for her work. So it's kind of two birds, one stone. She's like, okay, I really want to reconnect with my son. I miss him very much. But at the same time, she's like a doctor into science and experiments. And she's like, this psychic can either prove my point or it could be like a manipulation on narcissism and how people really think they're special and gifted with psychic powers even though they're not. She doesn't really like Simon too much. He's very young, cocky, and arrogant. He's put in like an interrogation room essentially with a double-sided mirror, and they all watch as the power's cut off. And as they turn back on, there's all over the walls, there are just written words carved into the wall which seem to be covered in blood, and he has not a scrape on him, but he's compulsing violently by seizures. So Mary starts to believe. And one thing that is eerie to me too is when Miles, her son, is dying, he's all scared about dying, and she says, you're just going to go to sleep, honey. So when Mary is in the room and looking around, she sees a sign on the wall that says, I'm not sleeping, mommy. And it's just bone-chilling. The experiment is seemingly successful, and the two end up becoming a couple, also launching a foundation together. However, the happiness does not quite last because one night in a drunken stupor, Miles reveals his plan, which is very deceptive and traumatic for Mary. He says one night, he's like, it was all a setup, I got you bad. Essentially, he wrote all the words on the wall with this chemical that you write and it's invisible until you spray something on it, and it, you know, oozes out. He had the little spray bottle hidden in a compartment. He took some penicillin to give him a seizure later. He paid a janitor to let him into the room. He did all this crazy stuff to trick her, essentially. So Mary discovers not only has Simon been unfaithful, but he has faked the entire experiment. And this devastates Mary. And all hope seems lost, but she doesn't quite give up on Simon until one night at her home, she sees the ghost of her son Miles. So is this a delusion? Is it trauma coming back for her, or is it very supernatural? And she says, we're so far into this company together, we can't quit now. Even Simon's like, I can't run away. Like, people believe that we're really doing this crazy supernatural stuff. So if I'm a fraud, you're a fraud, and we'll both go down together. So Mary's like, all right, let's continue it. But Simon doesn't know that Mary is seeing the ghost of her son. Simon is initially unwilling to participate, but does so when she mentions that it is necessary to raise funding for work. And then the story builds up. The story starts to progress, and there are little flickers of her seeing with her ghost son that are very eerie. There's one scene where Simon and her are outside on a swing talking, and the son's right beside her. The son is constantly with her, so at the end she invites another group of people to witness the experiment of him doing this crazy stuff, and she locks him in Miles' bedroom, and she's like, okay, do not open the door, do not turn on the lights, whatever happens to Simon is going to happen, and it's a part of the experiment. But little does she know, she somehow found a way to make Simon a conduit where he is in the room, and you just hear brutal, gnarly screams being ripped apart, and when they open the door, he is essentially a book of blood. His head shaved, he's bald from his head to toes, and he has words and names and phrases carved all over him, etched into him like he is the inside of pages of a book, and it is very disturbing. And it's kind of a reap what you sow situation where he was claiming to be a psychic reader that could communicate with the dead, and then it turns out the dead end up using him to communicate. And it's very fascinating, very eerie. The snippets they show of Miles are creepy. He's all bald, cancer patient ridden as a little boy, very haunting. And it's freaky. And then the last story that wraps up, like I said, Bennett starts the movie with him killing a dude because he's trying to find the book of blood, but then the rest of his story is unfolded. A bookseller owes money to shady people, and Bennett has been hired to collect, along with his driver Steve. When he is unable to produce what is owed, the seller attempts to save his life by telling Bennett of the Book of Blood, a rare tome worth $1 million that's located in an abandoned town. Bennett is intrigued by the story, and instead of, working with the bookseller, he kills him. Together with Steve, Bennett travels to an abandoned town where both men experience inexplicable and supernatural phenomena. And it's cool too, because this is the last part where you kind of see how all the stories are interwoven together. Bennett, he almost runs over Jenna, and then when they drive into the town where they're trying to find the book, there's a power outage that also happened in the Simon and Mary story, so you can see it's all happening essentially on the same night. Bennett and Steve get to the creepy, eerie town, and they break down, and Steve is starting to panic and trip a little bit, and he thinks he sees a lady running, so he gets kind of like beckoned by her, and he goes into this old church where Bennett goes up, and Steve is just holding a gun to himself, and he's like saying all this like profound stuff, saying, she wants me to be happy, she wants me to be with her, and he blows out his brain, and this freaks Bennett out, because Bennett's like, what is going on? But Bennett decides not to flee the mission, and he goes to the house where the Book of Blood is, and obviously it is Mary's house. So when Bennett gets in there, we see a disturbing image of Mary standing there with Simon sitting in the chair, bald, covered in all the cut marks, and he seems happy with this. And we also see the little ghost son. Bennett is pretty much like, yo, you're gonna give me the book, I will kill you, and Mary's unfazed by it. And she gives this whole spiel essentially where she's like, everybody will be a part of the Book of Blood. And then she tries to kill Bennett, but Bennett flees, and with one more final twist, he runs and is running through a neighborhood and goes to try to find help, but he stumbles into Ellie and Sam, the bed and breakfast owners, where they brutally kill him. Right when you think the movie is over, the scene cuts and it opens to Jenna at the hospital. She ends up surviving the crash, and you're very happy for her, because for the most part, most of these characters are kind of unlikable, but you're rooting for Jenna the whole time until you find out a tragedy with her. There's a flashback, and she's having a phone call with her boyfriend, and he's pretty much talking to her, saying how much he loves her. But we learn that she instigated him to kill himself. She's saying all this profound stuff like life isn't important, we can do this together, and he's overlooking the city on a ledge, scared to jump, and she pretty much peer pressures him to kill himself. And this is the reason why she's been having all these crazy anxiety, panic attacks. She feels bad, but we don't feel bad for her because she made a dude kill himself, and it's really messed up. So she has a revelation that she just leaves her house and she goes back to the bed and breakfast where she lets Ellie and Sam stitch up her eyes, take out her tongue, sew her ears, and put her in the coffin. And as she's laying there, she smiles. All these stories appear to be written on Simon's back and read by Mary, which is tying together the theme of Books of Blood, which I love because a lot of times in anthologies, there usually is an intro and an outro that tie together, but the way this whole movie ties together is very brilliant. I really like the pacing of this movie. It's not really slow. It is filmed very creepily, and one thing I happen to love about it a lot is the Clive Barker isms to it with the modern day twist. A lot of the old Clive Barker movies like Nightbreed, Hellraiser, Lord of Illusions, that was directed by Clive Barker, are very far-fetched and supernatural, but they have the vibe of his filmmaking to it. I feel like this movie, for being newer, especially when you see Simon in certain parts that get more dark and scary, feel like an original Clive Barker movie, and it's really great. I feel like the writer and director paid homage to him heavily. I have not seen the 2009 Books of Blood, but I would love to. The stories are pretty creepy. Like I said, the Jenna one is twisting and turning, and you never know what's happening. Mary and Simon is kind of straight to the point, and it's creepy, and even though Bennett is short-lived, it is very integral to the backbone of the story, and there are some creepy snippets. And all around, I thought the acting was great, the cinematography was good, the storytelling was just beautiful, and I just think it's one of Clive Barker's best movies, which is crazy because it came out so recently. Well, alright guys, that's the video. Have you seen this movie? Comment down below, let me know. Have you read Books of Blood? If you have, what's your favorite story? What do you want to see next in November? Because I got so many ideas, so please comment and let me know. Subscribe. Give me a thumber, hit that ding-a-ling button harassing you, telling you, hey, it's me, I'm here. I'm gonna say it one time for the one time and two time for the O's. Give me a hell yeah for horror, and happy Halloween. You guys are the best. I can't wait for more videos. Thank you.
There is a place where these horrors are transcribed.